It's time for Mr.
Fundamental.
Presented by no one.
The Toronto Raptors had a nice bounce back year last season. Despite Kyle Lowry leaving and playing a rookie big minutes, the Raptors still did really well by leaning on their defense. Nick Nurse is one of the better tacticians in the league and loves to experiment with different schemes. Ever since he became the head coach, their roster has went through a lot of changes, but some old principles still remain. This might be stopping the Raptors' defense from getting even better, so let's check it out. To get a better understanding, we'll look at their defense in 2019 and 2020 first. The Raptors ran a lot of traditional lineups, like Lowry and VanVleet as their lead guards, Kawhi, OG, Siakam, and Green as your wing stoppers, and Gasol and Ibaka as their interior bigs. Like most defenses, they focused on packing the paint and contesting threes, exactly in that order. See how 4 Raptors had both feet in the paint to help on the primary action. In semi-transition, the Magic run a quick pin down for Ross. Kawhi goes over the screen and Ibaka steps up to stop the 3. Off-ball defenders collapse on the roller to force the extra pass, and the effort to contest has never been a problem for the Raptors. The Raptors are usually on point with their weak side help. Here's an ice coverage, but Kemba's too quick for Ibaka. See how Lowry is in position to help, and the other 2 players have both feet in the paint to help reinforce that pack the paint principle. This forced a kick out, and an all-out effort to contest a shot. With rangy defenders like Kawhi, Green, and Siakam, this simple game plan was enough when you round out the starting 5 with Lowry and Gasol. Everyone knows their role and close out on the open man when needed, knowing that their teammates got their back. In 2020, they continued with this strategy, but with the departures of Kawhi and Green, they lost some length on the perimeter by replacing them with VanVleet and Powell. They resorted to sending help more when there's a size disadvantage, and packing the paint on initial penetration. As a result, they gave up the second most threes, but again, hustling out to contest on shooters has never been a problem. In fact, the Raptors allowed the lowest opponent 3-point percentage. Just look at this Lowry contest, his hand is literally in the shooter's face. They also added the nail help one pass away to put more pressure on the ball. Here's their usual defensive coverage with VanVleet chasing over the screen, and Ibaka in drop coverage since VanVleet got Lamb off the arc. Lowry's position here is the nail help one pass away. This not only stops penetration, but forces Lamb to pick up the ball, but it also allows Ibaka to recover to his man, just in case of a hard roll to the rim. Although this invites the kick out to a shooter, Lowry can still hustle out to contest. All they give up is a long mid-range jumper. Fast forward to 2021, things took an ugly turn. With the departures of Gasol and Ibaka, the Raptors found Baynes to fill their hole in the middle. I had hopes that he would do a decent job, but I was way off. Baynes never found the same chemistry with the team like Gasol and Ibaka had. He struggled to recover on aggressive blitzing schemes, but also ineffective as a deterrent at the rim, and this latter part was the reason for the Raptors' down year. If you compare the defensive numbers at the rim, they're allowing a much higher field goal percentage compared to previous years. Yes, they were allowing less shots within the restricted area, but that number was skewed because of late rotations leading to fouls. They went from ranking average in opponent free throw attempts to being 3rd last in the 2021 season. Baynes' struggle is the reason why Nick Nurse went with a smaller lineup by playing Siakam and Boucher more at center, and deployed a switching scheme that better suited their personnel. With such a drastic change in the middle of the season, blown coverages were bound to occur. Here's a high drag screen, and I had no idea what they wanted to do defensively. The Hawks get a 5-on-3 advantage and gets a score at the rim. Stopping Curry and the Warriors is a tough task, but a quick down screen gets both VanVleet and Powell on the same man. Even with the fumble, the Raptors were called for the foul. The Raptors are in their small ball lineup, and here's some off-ball action around Curry. The confusion leads to 2 players being open under the basket. Yikes. The Raptors has always been great at being in help position and putting pressure on the offense. Their change in defensive scheme led to miscommunications all around. Powell is fronting and expecting help behind him. OG is glued to Oladipo and not in position to help, and so is Boucher. A lob pass gets Tate deep in the paint, and there's nothing the defense can do. A quick double screen turns the Raptors' principles into a disadvantage. VanVleet and Powell switches, but the former gets caught on the second screen. Now Boucher has to show in the last screen. Powell uses the nail help principle, but makes him lose track of his man. No early rotation on the backdoor cut, and they give up another shot at the rim. This last season, the Raptors had a full off season to work on this, and also added more long, rangy defenders in Scotty Barnes and Precious Achiuwa. They had the 10th best defense in the league last year, so you must be wondering, why the hell am I making this video? Well, what I'm highlighting is maybe what's stopping them from being even better. You can still see the original principles on this possession. Siakam is already at the nail to help in case the drive comes this way. Barnes is rotating into the paint and preparing to help off a poor shooter in his eyeball. I'll get back to how this could be a problem later. All this deters a drive by Harden, and he settles for a step back instead. Because of all the switching, we can see some of the wall principles I talked about in my last video. When Achua gets beaten, Svi steps up to pick up the ball, while Achua picks up Svi's original man, and the offense has to reset. Here it is again. OG gets beat on the maxi drive. Siakam helps and picks up the ball, while OG sprints to Siakam's man. This is sort of a clean look, but I'm satisfied with giving up a long drifting floater with a contest by a rangy defender. What the Raptors did really well was their stocks. For those who don't know, that's a combination of steal and blocks. They were 2nd in steals, 17th in blocks, and had the most deflections per game. On the flip side, I remember reading an article, and they highlighted how destructive their defense is with stocks and deflections, but whenever they don't, opponents shot fairly well. What makes it worse is where their opponents are getting their shots. Their opponents feast at the rim and in the corners. While they only allowed the 19th most shots at the rim, they give up the most corner threes in the league. These are the 2 most efficient non-free throw areas to shoot the ball. A big culprit is still the original defensive principles. When Embiid gets it out on top, both Achua and VanVleet are doing that nail help to deter any drives. A hard cut by Harris gets the defense out of position and gets a dunk at the rim. Here's that nail help again to force the driver to pick up the ball, and Temple gets a good look for a 3. The nail principles might not be the issue, but it's the secondary help or helping the helper that's the problem. When the weak side shooter switches position, VanVleet is now the highest defender 1 pass away. Svi still thinks he's in that role, which is why he sinks that low. By not zoning up the 2 shooters, VanVleet has less time to recover, and that's why Temple gets a good look. In semi-transition, VanVleet gets beaten, but you can see the Raptors really enforce the help defense in the offseason. Unfortunately, both OG and Utah rotates over, leaving the weak side corner open. Siakam doesn't see the open man behind him, so he doesn't zone up the weak side and they give up the corner triple. In early offense, almost every Raptor is positioned up high. The Sixers are about to run a quick drag screen towards the middle, which is why OG is preparing for that nail help 1 pass away. VanVleet and Siakam screw up their coverage and force both weak side defenders to rotate over. Because of that nail help positioning by OG earlier, he's way out of position to help or zone up the shooters. Green gets a good look, but the Raptors dodge a bullet. The Raptors double Ingram in the post, and the weak side was zoning up pretty well. Once the cutter goes through, 2 players pick up the cutter. You can see OG is up high and focused on the ball, not knowing there's an open shooter behind him. Good effort by Siakam to recover, but Alvarado still hits the 3. The main problem of combining their nail help and switching scheme is that their players are stationed much higher and don't see what's going on behind them. See how high Barnes is throughout this possession. Boucher has to rotate when the post entry gets through, while OG stays with the high post flash, leaving Milton open underneath the basket. If Barnes isn't that high up, he could help OG out at the high post, and OG could cover the Milton cut. On the drive, Trent does the nail help 1 pass away. As the lowest defender, Boucher rotates over to protect the basket. But because of Trent's initial help, he's not in position to zone up the shooters, allowing a kick out to the corner and a knock down the open 3. To make matters worse, the Raptors' emphasis on sending help means these openings at the weak side corners are a common occurrence, because there isn't a defender zoning up the weak side. This leads to kickouts to the corner for the easiest 3 on the floor. You'll see a lot of mix-ups with their weak side help rotations because of all their switching. Siakam is on a poor shooter in Thibault, so he wants to help on the drive. Achua is their so-called center on the floor, so he wants to be the helper. When the drive actually happens, both players rotate into the paint, and a Thibault back screen leads to another wide open corner 3. Same thing again. Off-ball shooter switches place and causes a confusion between Siakam and Boucher. Both players are focused on helping a potential drive and not knowing who's picking up Maxey, leading to another open triple. On the drive, VanVleet makes a pretty good read to rotate early. This lets Achua stay on his man and eliminates any dump-off passes. Siakam is unaware of what's going on behind him, leaving the corner shooter open. Great effort by Achua to close out, but it couldn't stop the inevitable open 3. The Raptors like to mix things up and send help from different angles to catch players off guard. There's no better place to look at this than the playoff series against Embiid and the Sixers. The problem is that sometimes, even their own players get mixed up with the help. Both Trent and Siakam starts to double Embiid, but the former hesitates when he saw Siakam doing it. The ball gets whipped to the opposite corner and forces rotation all around. The Harris drive draws 3 defenders in the paint, with no one left to zone up the shooters, leading to another open triple. Then there were times where no help came, and left Achua on an island to try and stop Embiid. A mismatch in the post leads to both VanVleet and Siakam to double. The rest of the off-ball defenders are helpless to zone up the shooters with this type of split decision, and they give up another wide open look. The Nets identified the mismatch and finds KD on VanVleet. Siakam starts making his way there and feels safe to do so because Barnes is in good position to zone up the weak side shooters. A few frames later, Barnes is too high up, maybe wanting to show some help too, leaving Patty Mills wide open in the corner for the triple. Another problem I've noticed might be how they try to seek out stalks or deflections. After coming off the screens, Achua is showing to let VanVleet get back in position. Achua jumps on the fake, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but it actually prevents him from recovering to his man. This chain reaction affects Barnes as well, who has to stay with JV even longer, giving Ingram more time and space to knock down this 3. Here's basically the exact same play, and the fake gets Birch off his feet. This time the weak side doesn't tag JV long enough, and he gets the reverse to fall. This type of reaction is good if they're switching everything, but for these two specific possessions, they don't want a size mismatch against VanVleet, or else they run the risk of the offense scoring over VanVleet's small frame before they could send help, just like on this possession. So what could the Raptors do to sort out these problems? One idea I've got is to instill some sort of hierarchy in their help defense. What I'm talking about is similar to what they did in 2019 and 2020. The traditional lineups had clear roles for everyone. The bigs will be the primary helper, as a deterrent at the rim. Perimeter players will help the helper and run players off the 3-point line, simple as that. With the amount of switching they do now, there aren't any clear roles for each player. It's a good thing to catch offenses off guard, but it might confuse the defenders too. On the quick drag screen, all 3 of the Raptors frontcourt players rotate in the paint. Having a rule like the lowest player is the first helper would let the others zone up the weak side and build a strong defensive foundation before adding in some improvised help. It didn't matter here, because all 3 fours were ineffective on the contests. The Raptors want to shadow VanVleet's mismatch against Ingram, and Siakam was the lowest player on the weak side before the haze cut to the dunker spot. When the ball swings to the other side, Birch should close out to the corner instead of Siakam because the distance is shorter. They rely on Siakam to recover, and actually does a good job defending the drive, but Jones still gets the bucket to fall. There are still occasions where the improvised help could be useful. VanVleet is the one to rotate over, and it makes sense because the corner shooter is Thibault. VanVleet might not be ideal to contest shots at the rim, but he's got quick hands to knock the ball away. By ironing out who's the first helper gonna be, the Raptors will have a better idea of when they need to zone up the weak side. Birch is the lowest player, and he steps up. VanVleet correctly sinks down to zone up Birch and his man. When Ingram makes the pass, that's when VanVleet sprints out to his man. With the post entry, Boucher rotates as the lowest help defender. Achua sinks down to recover Boucher's man, and VanVleet zones up to 2 shooters. In a perfect world, Siakam would share some of that responsibility, but the Raptors close out on the shooters and only give up a contested running floater. By knowing that the help is coming from the lowest man, their nail defender knows they're responsible for helping the helper. There are 2 solutions. Either to completely get rid of the nail help one pass away, but that really goes against the principle of putting pressure on the ball, or defenders need to pick up the habit of getting in position after digging on the nail help. Otherwise, they're just going to keep giving up corner 3s. As I said before, the Raptors have a top 10 defense despite of the problems I mentioned in this video. They have the players and coaches for the job, but their roster is very different to the one Nick Nurse coached a few years ago. The Raptors are sort of stuck between 2 schemes, which might be why they're great at getting stocks and deflections, but just around average when they don't. I'm sure they'll find a way around it at some point, but just imagine how scary it would be when they do iron out these issues. That's it from me, and I'll see you guys next time.